Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Revalorized podcast. We are back for a new season of Americas. I might come out with an EMEA or Pacific episode, probably not as in depth as the Americas because I don't know them as well, especially Pacific. But I'm probably going to stay away from China just because I know the least about it and I don't feel like it produce good enough content. Not that this content's going to be all that good, but well, first things first, why don't we quickly run through all of the 11 teams that are joining us this year for VCT Americas? We're going to run through this kind of quick because I kind of messed up my recording schedule and I forgot that VCT starts today in about 30 minutes. So, first things first, we're going to run through the Loud roster. So, Loud unfortunately lose Ospas, which I think is a little bit of a toughie. Having QCK I think will be cool. I've liked him in the past, but I just worry for this team because not having that superstar power of Aspas is gonna feel weird. And then their staff, completely different. I I hesitate to say that this team's gonna be any good. I think they'll be able to compete, but I'm just not sure how it's gonna end up going. But at the end of the day, it's still Sadhak, it's still less, and I mean, Kalanzin and Tui's kind of showed that they could compete and play, even having lost Pankata and Sasi. So I think it should be good, and I mean, we'll see them. Go to see them tomorrow as the first match of the day against Sentinels, which should be a pretty much a giga banger. Next up we have NRG. I think that NRG are looking pretty good this year. I think they're probably favorites in America's, probably top three, along with Leviathan and Sentinels. My opinion. I think they also just have the most to prove because a lot of these guys haven't played together in a while. Marv, Victors, and Crashies, obviously that optic core, but still, it's been a while since they've played. On top of that, you've got Ethan and Demon One coming in, which we know they're good caliber players, but you look across this roster and there's no IGL. I know that Ethan's picking it up for this upcoming season, and I'm excited to see what he can do. And I know Crashes and Victor mid rounding is kind of crazy, and Marv's able to do his own thing. I just think that there's going to be a little bit of a kind of struggle period where they try to get back together and try to kind of pick it up. But luckily, they get to start out with Furia, so I think they'll be fine. And then staff, they still retain Chet and they add two analysts and then have Tana's HQ as their assistant. But bringing the two analysts should also help kind of pull some of the stress off Chet. I know that now that there's not as much of a strict IGL like FNS, I think that some of the analytical side might have declined a little bit. So I'm glad to see that they're kind of picking it up. Next, we move on to EG. So Evil Genius is kind of forced to overhaul their roster after the epidemic of roster jail. Potter remains still as coach, but now we've got Jogamo still remains, but we've got Apoth finally coming off the bench of the EG little practice squad experiment. They bring in Derek from 100 Thieves, which shout out my boy Derek, I love his ass. Um, then we also get to see Nature and Supa. Nature kind of trialing with 100 Thieves at that Red Bull event. I thought he looked pretty good. It was a little weird to watch though, just because you knew going into it that he really hadn't gotten much time to gel and practice with the rest of the team. It's kind of just more so he was brought in as kind of a trial because the Boostio thing was still up in the air, but eventually 100 Thieves got Boostio, so it doesn't really matter. I think this team's pretty good. I think you're probably looking at not. I hesitate to say the bottom of the pack because I think that's kind of reserved for MIBR and crew types. But I think that just having players of this caliber is not. It's a solid roster. I think that it'll compete, but I don't think that you should really be expecting anything from it. Not like you had for AG last year. Next we move on to Cloud9, a very fun roster in my opinion. So, first off, they on staff they bring in Imi, but they lose out on MCE, which I'm fine with for a Vanity-led core because I think that Vanity probably would thrive better under Imi just because it's a little bit less of a younger roster. I know that Oxy's being brought in, which I'm super high on Oxy. I really liked him last year playing for G2 with the old Sentinels core. Um, but yeah, they bring Jakey back over, which I do like. I preferred him over Rooney for most of the season. I thought he was pretty good as a smokes player. Um, but I'm not sure what's gonna happen here because I know Jakey played smokes and I know Vanity plays smokes, but he could also play initiator. So I'm expecting Vanity on the initiator, I guess. I mean, I guess we'll get to see in a little bit here, but overall, I think this team's pretty good. Whippy being brought in is nice. Whippy has just constantly had visa issues ever since kind of COVID and the issues between Ukraine and Russia, I think have caused a lot of these issues where he's just seemingly temporarily out of like able to play. So we'll kind of see what happens there. But I think this is good. I think that with any vanity led roster, you should kind of expect that pretty soon they're going to go through a really high period. The question really is just can the high period that they go through kind of allow them to coast through and get to a major event, or is this just going to be a little bit of a coast through in like stage one where they do really well in the group stage but kind of fall? Because vanity led teams always have that little like high point. You saw it in the original uh, V1 roster when they were able to make it to Reykjavik. You saw it when he switched over to Cloud9 at the end of 2021 and got to bring that team to champions. But that's kind of the track record for his led teams, but we'll kind of see what happens there from then on. Now we're going to move on to Leviathan. Leviathan makes me excited. Um, this is probably a top three team for sure. I generally prefer a lot of the players on NRG because I want them to succeed more, and they're kind of the America boys. But something in my gut is just kind of telling me that this is probably the best team to come out of Americas. Got King and Mazzino. Hopefully Mazzino's able to pick it up from last year. I thought that he struggled a little bit, especially early on, but he was able to pick it up. But bringing in Aspas is just always a big deal. Tex too. I think that Tex showed a lot of promise on the guard last season, and then bringing in Com. The Com thing is a little bit nerve wracking for me because I don't know. I know that you're gonna look on the substitutes here and you're gonna see Naswar. I didn't think Naswar was really that bad, and I mean removing him so late kind of brings some questions into mind for me, and I wonder if there was some sort of issue between King, Aspas, or Mazzino with Naswar, and so that kind of brought in Calm, or was just a matter of bringing him in because he was available. But it doesn't really seem like too much of an upgrade. Don't get me wrong, I love Calm and I love his dad on Twitter. If you haven't seen Calm's dad, try to check him out on Twitter. I think it's like at Papa Calm. He's pretty good. He's pretty entertaining. But I don't know. It's a bit of a question mark to see Calm on this roster so late. But I mean, I know that I trust a lot of King's IGLing, and finally we can look at the staff and see that owner is gone. I thought he was great on crew back in the day, back in 2021, but I think that that interview last season was pretty damning, kind of having him come out and say, "Oh yeah, I don't really believe in anti-threading," which like, come on, bud anti-stratting you need for this team to succeed. So it was kind of a big question mark for me there. So now we move on to Furia. I know a lot of people were pretty high on this Furia roster at the beginning of the offseason when they kind of came in and started to pound. I know they did really well in the offseason. You kind of look at them. I mean, just kind of go click on them. You can look at their off-season performance. You saw a lot of did pretty good at Superdome and pretty good at multi-platform. I think Superdome was the big one that kind of everybody thought, oh, okay, this might be something. Then they kind of dropped off with Convergence, which I think was a bit of a question mark for people. So we'll see. But overall, still pretty excited. I'm very happy that they brought in Havoc. Um, because I thought he was pretty good on the Union. It was a little weird though to not see him go to Loud because I know that was the big rumor. But Furia then bringing in Luke Zera. Now, I can't really speak too much on this roster because I'm not really deep into the Brazilian scene at all, really. But I expect them to be kind of probably fighting around the same area as Evil Geniuses, maybe a little bit better because I think that some of their guys are more proven than Evil Geniuses in terms of like tier one. I just kind of question a little bit of Apoth and Supa because I know that they've had stints in the upper echelon in that tier one, but they haven't lasted super long. So I mean, I think we'll kind of see. But I do not. I mean, they opened their season against NRG, and I don't think that's going to be a win. I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit through my pick'ems later, but I just don't see too much green light for this Fury esports team. Moving on to probably one of the most hyped rosters because the Sentinels fans are fanatical. We've got Sentinels carrying over from last season. We've got Zekin, Sasi, and Tens, with the surprise of the offseason being Pankata kind of almost relegated to this like bench status where I know there was some visa issues and I think it was some other issue with him. It might have been like learning. I think it was mainly a visa issue that kind of allowed Zelsis to step into the starting roster and then he just took off and never looked back. You bring in John QT, the IGL for M80 last year, so now you finally have a fully committed IGL, which you haven't really had since Def. But even still, Def was a little iffy because I know that on that XSET roster, he tended to kind of split that IGLing duty with Aaron. So being able to see this full roster, I think is going to be good. They looked really good in the offseason. They played a ton, which I think was all really good for them, and it should kind of incorporate into some really good results. My only question mark here is, your staff, you're holding over Kaplan and Drew Spark. My only thing is like Sentinels last year and have been kind of known to make what I would call semi-rash decisions. I think that this time around it's probably a little bit better because I think Rob Moore, the owner CEO, is kind of more set into this roster and believes more into this roster. But I still get a little hesitant when I talk about teams like Sentinels and 100 Thieves because I know that how much emphasis they put on winning. So if this roster starts losing, you may see like Pankata sub back in and all this kind of stuff. But overall, I like this roster. I think it's going to be a little bit interesting seeing kind of what Tens does because I know me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Tens. I don't think in any regard he's a bad player. I just constantly wonder as kind of the season goes on. It just kind of seems like he's getting continuously outclassed. I think he's a great person and a great player, but I just don't know if he's going to be able to keep up with the amount kind of being asked from him. I mean, you kind of saw it a lot last season during the season. The LCQ run kind of salvaged it a little bit when they were able to kind of play around him. Got to play a little bit like the KO kind of flexy stuff and wasn't as relegated to the duelist where sometimes he can struggle. So I hope that, we see Zekin on that primary duelist because I think that's where this team is going to greatly excel. So moving on to my favorite team over here, repping the drip, 100 Thieves, baby. Yeah, carry over Asuna, Bang, and Cryo. Unfortunately, in my opinion, we lose Derek and Stellar. Um, when we bring in EO and Boostio, I think I'm pretty excited for this roster. I wish that there would have been a little bit more time in preparation. Unfortunately, there wasn't much to do about that with the whole EG kind of prison situation. Glad that Hunter Thieves kind of leaned into it and got to, have the little trailer of them releasing Boostio from the prison cell. I thought that was a pretty good bit. But overall, I'm pretty excited for this roster. I think that Asuna and Bang are still super good, and I hope that now having brought in, look at the stats page, you bring in Zix and Mikes, and you have an analyst, which I didn't know the analyst, I'm gonna be honest. But bringing in them, hopefully to kind of see a new angle. Hopefully, you're able to get a little bit more out of Cryo, and he's not just kind of relegated this weird position where it kind of feels like there's no support. So overall, I'm looking forward to this roster. I know that they have the ability to be good. I just wonder if these are the kind of right decisions to be made because sometimes it just kind of feels like a confidence thing. And it's still a relatively young core, so hopefully Boostio bringing the EU is able to kind of bring a little bit more, especially with Boostio, bring more of a kind of veteran leadership IGL process that kind of is able to gel with Zix and Mike's and the coaching staff. So now we move on to probably the team that I know the least about, which is MIBR. I can't really say much on this team, so I probably won't, just because I haven't really seen them play. Um, I think they're probably the worst team just on paper with player quality in Americas. Nothing against a lot of these players. I know FRZ is pretty good, and I don't mind Mazen. Um, but what really gets me excited for this team is bringing in Bazooka and Fraud. The two, like, probably the best coaches in Brazil, in my opinion. I know, kind of them coming over, having that loud core together and kind of splitting their separate ways a little bit, but now they're back together under one. If anything is to get you excited about this roster, it's the coaching staff. But I mean, the players just don't excite me. I think that there's still a chance that they don't perform last in Americas just purely off the fact that their coaching staff is so strong. But I mean, I think it's left more to be seen. Now we move on to the last of the teams to carry over from last season, 2021's Cinderella crew. It's a very different roster from kind of that run with only Laws and Klaus and Kesnet kind of carrying over. But now we get to see Melzer, Shy, and MTA. Unfortunately, this team loses Davies in the offseason due to his unfortunate kind of passing, which was kind of a shock. And I don't know. I thought he was a great player, so I think losing him will be tough. I mean, Kesnet I thought he was pretty good last season, but sometimes it still just felt like Kesnet was trying to do 2021 Kesnet things and wasn't necessarily as good as he could have been. It kind of felt like he was playing on his own. So I'm surprised to kind of see them sticking with Kesnet, especially since kind of Taco was up in the air. I know Takalia being released by Leviathan, could have led to some shifting around here at Crew, especially with kind of them dropping Mr. Fourth Quarter Nags. But we'll see. Coaching staff, nothing really changes. Adam stays. DDX. I mean, I think that this team is probably going to be with MIBR kind of near the bottom, fortunately, but see. Now we bring in the winners of the Ascension, G2, formerly the Guard. Um, I mean, this team's super consistent. They've always shown it. I'm excited. I like this Josh RT led team. I just struggle with the fact that it is just Josh RT. I don't know, really if they have anybody else behind the scenes. But regardless, I think that, there'll be a struggle there for the coaching staff to be able to keep up. But I know that these are really solid players, Jonah P, Net, Trent, and Vale. I'm excited to see Trent kind of up on the big stage. It's been a while, and I mean, that kid is just crazy. Valen, it'll be cool to see him kind of step up in IGL again on this big stage. And I mean, I think he proved last year was a very good caller, very consistent. I just hope that he can kind of carry that through because I know there was kind of issues on his first run with the Guard that first time around in 2020 in 2022, just kind of being able to keep that consistency all the way through. And then they lose Tex to Leviathan, but they bring in Leaf. I think Leaf as a main duelist will be pretty cool because I mean you got a really solid main duelist in him, so I think it should be fun. It's gonna be a fun team to watch. I think they're gonna kind of battle around the middle of the pack. I think it's gonna be really interesting to kind of see which, like, kind of where they sit when the dust settles. I think that this team is probably not good enough to make Madrid, but I think that the further on in the year that they go, where more slots open up for America's teams to attend these international events, I think that that's where you to kind of keep. So now we'll take a short break while I drink a little bit of water and kind of set up for the pick'ems portion of this episode. Okay, and now we're back for the pick'em section. We're going to run through this really quick because, again, I want to make sure that I get these pick'ems in and still have enough time to watch VCT, which starts in 9 minutes. So I'm tugging it a little bit close. So hopefully, these pick'ems end up being good. Fingers crossed kind of here, but we'll see. So when it comes to Group A, so these two matches you'll be able to see today as of the time of this recording. Oh shit, I actually gotta get these fast. So NRG Furia, I think that these two are pretty much givens, Cloud9 and NRG. I think that NRG bringing in that super solid roster, I think that they may struggle a little bit, but I don't think it's anything that is too crazy. I think that Furia has the potential for an upside here. Don't get me wrong. I think Furia out of Fury and MIBR, they're the most likely to not get dropped first round. Because I mean, Fury had that success in the offseason, and I'm excited for them. But I just think that this energy roster is too strong. And on top of that, just got just a downturn from Furia. It seemed like as the offseason went on, it was nice to see them play in so many events, but it kind of felt like a progress that they couldn't keep up. And then Cloud9, super young, super hype vanity roster. And I mean, I'm just excited to see Oxy on this big stage. I think he's going to really show up and show out. Um, Move on here to the elimination. I think it's just going to be Furia. IBR has been kind of radio silent in the offseason, and I don't really see that as a good thing, and I don't really do much. I think that some of the strats they may come out with, some of the counter comping they might have, I think could be interesting. It could be a lot of fun, but I still hesitate to kind of pick them anywhere but a first round exit, unfortunately. To move on, first qualifier, we're going with NRG. Going with that solid kind of overall team roster. I think they're going to come out in the first seed, not have to be able to avoid the play-in. That's not to say Cloud9's bad. I think Cloud9 is definitely going to be competitive in this game. I think that Vanity versus Ethan is going to be a very fun matchup with that experienced IGL versus the kind of newer IGL. But I just think that the edge here goes to NRG just with the amount of pure, proven superstar firepower. I think that some of the players on Cloud9 kind of looking more so at like Jake and Oxy still have to prove themselves a little bit more on the big stage. And against kind of this upper echelon of players, because I know in a lot of the big matches, that was a little bit of a question mark for me. But we move on to the decider, and I think Cloud9 takes it. I think that Cloud9's just the better team. I think that Fury is good, but Cloud9 just has the roster, and it's always been Vanity, and I think it always will be Vanity, and it just should be an absolute blast. So, we're going to lock that in. If my page loads, form invalid. Don't know what that is. But okay, we're gonna run through quick clicks again. Thank you. There we go. Okay. Now that pick will lock in about 4 minutes, so we gotta run through these quickly. Cloud versus Sentinels. I don't like them. As me personally, I'm not a big fan of this team. I got a big rivalry with my boys over at 100 Thieves. But I just think that they're too good to overlook, and I think that Loud losing such a big piece as Aspas is really gonna hurt. I think it's gonna take a game for them to kind of warm up into this. Leviathan, 100 Thieves. Leviathan. I don't think that 100 Thieves is bad necessarily. I just think that the Leviathan roster is too strong. I think that 100 Thieves have always had issues playing against Aspas. On top of that, bringing in kind of Calm and Tax. I think this is kind of one of the closest. This and um, NRG are the closest you're going to get to a super team, and I unfortunately don't think that Thieves is going to be able to. And as we drop down to the first elimination match, I'm going to rep my boys. I'm going to go with 100 Thieves here. I think that Loud is a pretty good roster, but I just have faith in 100 Thieves kind of pulling one out. I think that, Loud is going to struggle a little bit, kind of finding that new rhythm with QCK. So I think that this is the best chance for 100 Thieves to get one, and then I think that they. Sentinels Leviathan, we're gonna go here with Leviathan, and then Sentinels qualifying out in that second slot. Um, I don't think there's much to be said. I think that Leviathan and Sentinels is kind of a toss-up. I just kind of view this more heavy superstar firepower team in Leviathan. I think it might take some adjusting. There is definitely a shot that Sentinels don't make it on this first slot, or that they do make it on this first slot, but I just don't see them kind of advancing through there. But I see them kind of wiping the floor with Thieves. I think that both these rosters are talented, but I just think that Sentinels has just a better overall like firepower, star power. So I'm gonna see this one going to Sentinels, and I think unfortunately 100 Thieves kind of bounce out earlier than I would for them. But Not much I can do there. We're gonna submit that pick 'em, and that one will go. I may edit that kind of in the coming days or a little bit because I mean I have till 4 o'clock tomorrow, but we'll see. Finally, to wrap out Group C, I think this one's a pretty easy one. I think this just goes G2, G2, G. Um, I don't think Crew has the legs in this group. I think it's a little unfortunate, but they kind of just got stuck with it. I think Crew's best chance to win is that decider against EG. I'm really high on this G2 roster, bringing in, Leaf to kind of replace that Tex loss, but then also just having Trent. I think that Trent is an animal. Personally, he would have been, if he would have been willing to leave this G2 guard roster, I would have wanted him instead of his 100 Thieves roster. Um, but unfortunately, he wants to stay with the boys. Can't blame him. So he's going to stay with G2, and I just think that they kind of sweep. But I think that overall, I think that Derek and kind of this EG core, along with Potter's coaching, is just going to be too much for Crew. And I think that at the end of the day, it's just going to all fall down to EG just kind of having that team differential. I think that Crew is still good, but I just think that it's going to take Crew a little bit to kind of warm up, figure out their identity, and just kind of learn to play with one another. That sometimes, especially last season, it really didn't feel like they were on the same page, and it kind of felt like Kesnet was doing his own thing. So hopefully they're able to kind of fix those issues and continue. But I just don't think that's happening in the kickoff. So there we have it. Um, our three teams in the final automatically are G2, Leviathan, and NRG, and then we'll see C9, Sentinels, and EG play through in the little play-in bracket. Now I don't know if we get to do a pick'em for the play-in bracket. Like I don't know how they PLR will let you do the pick'ems here, but I would imagine that it would be Sentinels probably advancing to that final four, which would make the game which means that Leviathan would have to play G2 or NRG to get out, which an NRG Leviathan game for qualification to Madrid would be an absolute gigabanger. All right, so I want to wrap this episode here because it's 4 o'clock, which means that this game is live, baby. So if you're watching this right as it comes out, turn this off, come back to this episode later. There's VCT Americas on, baby. We've waited months for this. Finally, we're hitting it today at the time of this recording. NRG Fury is starting. Then we've got Cloud9 MIBR. Tomorrow, we get to watch Loud Sentinels and Leviathan Thieves. So, with that being said, thanks to everybody for watching this episode. Again, look out for maybe a Pacific episode, maybe a EMEA episode where I just kind of yap and do pick'ems and kind of try to have fun. But if you're a betting man, I know that there's kind of some like little thunder pick bets here. I know I would bet on NRG, Cloud9, Sentinels, and Leviathan in these opening four matches. But that's still left to be seen. Again, don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.